Welcome back to Paradise Killer. Another day here at Paradise, and I think we're going to want to talk about the Blood Bar skits and Shinji. These are interesting ideas, and I think they can be used very effectively. I'm not going to say they are ineffective in terms of how this game used them, but in terms of understanding the concepts involved, we have to talk about what they can accomplish and what they can't accomplish. Fundamentally, Shinji and the Blood Bar skits, this is Shinji by the way, a time to cut the air, a time for monolithic cities, a time for blood, a time for psychosis. That was weird. So, Shinji and the Blood Bar skits are the only pseudo-interactive elements that we find via pickups. All of our other pickups are either just points or they're descriptions of something, you know, a little tag telling us that something cool happens somewhere, sometime. Like, oh, here's a description of lily pads. It's weird. Here's, you know, whatever else we're getting involved with. That sort of thing works very well, but it isn't interactive. It doesn't provide a pacing change. That is to say, it will do its job of making the player feel like they are immersed in the world, but it won't actively make the player change their pace. It won't change the way that they're playing the game. So they can just go bumpity 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 bump, roughshod over all of those collectibles. But the Blood Bar skits and the Shinji skits have a different pace. They're more deliberate. They're things you can't just spam through. And that means that they are very powerful ways to make the player change how they feel about the level at any given second. They give a little bit of a breath of fresh air, a little bit of a moment of reprieve. It's a very powerful way to do things. In other games, you know, it would be like, oh, we're fighting enemies, we're fighting enemies, we're fighting enemies. And then there'd be a level segment that's kind of a downbeat, lets you catch your breath. There's no enemies to fight here. So the fighting enemy stuff is running around collecting junk. Oh, we're collecting junk, we're collecting junk, we're collecting junk. And then the downbeat is, oh, Shinji's talking to us, or oh, we're having a conversation with people. And if the only conversations were these major ones that take half an hour, that wouldn't really work in terms of how the levels unfold and how exploration unfolds. And that's why Shinji and the Blood Bar skits are so important to how this game works. But Shinji and the Blood Bar skits could be more than that. They could also help to lay the foundation of the world in a more aggressive way. Shinji does do this to some extent. Most of the things Shinji talks about are either tone building or world building, and they're very nicely done. The Blood Bar skits, I'm not sold on. We'll talk about those later, maybe next time we run into one. Now we're just going to talk to Lydia Day Break for an hour. This is the first character we met, aside from Judge, who we met via phone. She's married to the big red skeleton.
Let's go for a drive,
LD. What led you to the life of an assassin?
Damn it, LD.
How come you're asking me about that now?
What the hell are you talking
And now a mass murder happens and you just happen to bring up the fact that I was an assassin? I had a lot of time to think in the Idlelands. Not a lot to do, huh? I missed you.
I'm glad you're
I missed you too, LD.
complicated.
I don't like to talk about it, you know? That assassin life is behind me. Being an assassin was simple. You didn't have to worry about a lot once you got good at it. Find the target, learn the target, end the target. Love, though, that's complicated. That's why I drive and paint. I always need a skill to master. You got a new car. She's pretty, ain't she? Upgraded. Got bored of that muscle car look. Masahiro, that's the company, offered to refit the old girl, but I wanted a change. So here she is, Burn Parliament. Lots of memories of that old girl, though. Endless summer nights, LD, endless possibility. Things were simpler. Things are so messed up now. That's the way of the world. You cool if I drop you off at the beach? Sure. Now, Lydia is the character that's responsible for humanizing the islands. She is a person who talks like a person and acts like a person and likes to do things like drive cars and paint. So her main role, at the beginning of the game at the very least, is to anchor us in this reality and show us that people live here. You buying this Henry
Come
story?
on, LD.
Well, I hope so.
Ooh, why?
These are really old details that we've
I'm
long
glad you're
since
back,
finished up.
LD. Got it.
And that's because we left Lydia Day Break for nearly last. There are very few characters that we haven't talked to. I'm trying to think if there's one we haven't talked to besides Lydia. Yeah, there are a few, but still. We left Lydia until nearly the very end, just because she was on the wrong side of the island. So, she's telling us that we need to worry about Yuri and Carmelina.
What the hell?
The island feels bad, LD.
We've already figured out all of this stuff. We've completely already found out exactly what happened, that she was there the whole time, that everything worked out great, there's no problems. But she does tell us that she hasn't told us in that particular segment, but she does have something left to tell us.
It's complicated. Come on, LD.
So she's talking about Carmelina, telling us who Carmelina is. We're kind of pushing through this just because it's stuff that we've already discovered. And that's kind of irreverent of me because it's carefully crafted. But because it's coming in at the wrong time,
Sure.
it's a little bit hard for me
Come
to
on, LD.
really play it up. We would have to. We could pretend that this was the first character that we had interviewed, and we were gathering this information anew. And that's one of the weakest parts about these kinds of open world games, when you do something that makes your interactions irrelevant. Like things that you should have done at the beginning, you can't do because you've learned things since then, or you've become too powerful. That's always going to be the difficulty in these kinds of games. And by the way, here you can see some of the roughness I was talking about in the artistic depictions of the characters. We got some extremely rough hands and forearms. We got some extremely rough eyebrows. But her design just really pops. I like the design. It's very noisy, and that's on purpose.
Damn it, LD. The island.
Don't test.
Huh?
So here's one of the things that we can get that's not early game. We asked Acid about things, and she said, oh, you've got to ask them about their last job. And then here she is telling us about the last job, and it didn't really go anywhere. She just says, yeah, we did a last job, and we don't generally talk about it.
What the hell are you talking about? Huh?
Unearned power is bad news. So we haven't talked much about Yuri Knight. He's the character I don't like. Yuri Knight has apparently been seduced by a god. It never really comes to anything significant. But here's Lydia talking about it. It was weird. Almost overnight he became handsome, got six-pack abs, and started to be charming. His charm's fake, though. He's trying to get his own way all the time. Be careful with him. He's been trying to push his own agenda on the council, but it's never gone well. Montserrat was fixed on his plan, and Yuri couldn't push him around. I got a bad feeling about him a while back and pulled some records from the Moon database. By the way, we found out the Moon database was recently corrupted, so these are records we would not be able to get if we went for them now. And there's Yuri asking to join the council.
Come on, LD.
What can you tell me about Yuri? And this is where she gives us a clue that we need. I was talking to him all night. He was my handler for the pickups.
I'm messing
Moving
with
on to
you.
moving people onto the next island, you know? The islands exist in separate pockets of reality, so we can't just hop on a boat trip over there. We have to go through the Paradise Gates, get our trans-dimensional travel on. Masahiro Heavy Industries built this car to do it. It's the only thing on the island that can go through the gates, and I'm the ferry woman. On the night an island dies, I wait for a syndicate member to report to Yuri that they're done, and then they drive him around. Yay! You were in contact with him all night?
The island.
Well, there was a time when I couldn't contact him. When we got to the Paradise Gates, I checked in with him to confirm the warm-up sequence, but I couldn't get through to him. And there's what we needed.
What the hell?
If you can prove it, sure. Come on, LD.
She's telling us that she has something to discuss. This is interesting because it's the only probe I know of that doesn't come after we hang out, but after we discuss something with her. This is a sensitive subject. It's about someone on the island, but it might be something you don't want to hear about. You know I told you that Yuri suddenly got ripped overnight? He became a new person? What if it was a god that did
What
it?
the hell?
The hell are you
Deception,
talking about?
like what happened to you. The goddess Enchanted Blue bestows physical gifts in return for devotion.
It's complicated.
Deception by a god is a crime. I just don't want to accuse him.
Got it.
He's been going on and on about retrieving her body. She's dormant in the Sahara Caverns in the real world. Enchanted Blue is guarded by elite custodians. So those are those... they're not Mesopotamian, even though I keep calling them that. They're those goat men, or those sphinx men, whatever you want to call them. There's no way Montserrat would let it happen. I think that's why he's been pushing to get on the council, though. If he's been deceived, would he really kill the council? He's not going to be on the new council. What if he doesn't stop until he is? So she's trying to point us at YURI Night, and most of her clues that we're going to find out do point us at YURI Night. She's telling us she couldn't get in contact with him. She's telling us he's probably, been seduced by a god and all that stuff. She does know a couple of other things, but those are the big ones. We haven't gotten to the parts where we actually start to harass her. Let's get to those.
Huh?
Why?
Why are your tire tracks on the penthouse?
Come on, LD.
That wasn't from last night. When was it? A couple of weeks ago. I went up there to think. The sunset looks so good up there. Surely you weren't up for a little infiltration? You really think I was on the roof of the council building trying to break in?
Sure.
Somebody did exactly that. Do you often go climbing? A new hobby?
Right on, LD.
Never been one for those physical pursuits, you know that. So the rappelling gear I found near the tire tracks from your car on the roof of the council building didn't belong to you. No, sorry. I found your knife outside the penthouse. So this is one of the things I kind of wish that this sort of game would allow. I would really like the option to steamroll these people and to just be like wham, 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 and have them respond as if they're getting steamrolled. Because it's open world, however, the writers don't really know how much evidence we've got going into these conversations. So every single time we confront her with another piece of evidence, she doesn't get more flustered or confused. She just reacts as if it had been 4 or 5 hours since we last talked to her.
I'm glad you're back, LD. Come on, LD.
That's strange.
Come on, LD.
I don't like this.
What?
Got it.
The island feels bad, LD. If you can prove it, sure.
So she basically just shut us down, which is the standard operating procedure since the game cannot branch. What do you know about the second Holy Seal? It's a secret. I've never been through that big door in the council building. Sure. Yeah, we got a message from Witness.
What?
Sure.
The Moon database has a backup of your tablet. There's a message from Witness with a file attached that's the key to using the obelisks.
Weird.
We also used it. She's saying she never got a chance to look at it and it was all stuff she didn't know about. And then we can say, well, do you often like to dress up in space helmets? See, this sort of rolling pattern works really well in something like Phoenix Wright, where you know you've got all of the evidence when you step into the courtroom, because you can't step into the courtroom until you've got all the evidence. It's harder to write in a game like this, where the player might not have both pieces of evidence.
Sure.
Why?
Primer's
Come on, LD.
And again, she just shuts us down. Now we're going to go through a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter.
Right on, LD.
Just a bunch of negatives.
Complicated. What are you talking about, LD? Why?
There we are. And that was an episode talking about blood bar skits and people that drive cars. We're going to end right here, and then what we'll do in the next episode, I think we're going to go up and talk to her boyfriend. And won't that be fun? See you then.
Getting saved.